You found the skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on this.
Hey there, YouTube. Welcome back for the second and final part of us looking at this bit about the nested hierarchy from Kurt Wise. Last time, we left off with Kurt getting almost everything wrong about red pandas. And now we're going to learn about some more mammals whose taxonomy and anatomy he's going to butcher. Anyway, take it away, Kurt.
Here's another example, the pronghorn. In North America, we have this thing called the pronghorn.
Ah yes, the majestic Antilocapra americana, one of my favorite North American mammals, and one I love seeing in the wild, which I have done from time to time. It's in the family Antilocapridae, which is in the superfamily Giraffoidea, along with the giraffe and the okapi, and with a lot of now extinct diversity on both the antilocaprid side and the giraffid side. By the way, they're in a clade called Pecora, and together are the sister group to the clade I can't find a name for, but that includes deer, bison, and musk deer, which aren't deer at all, but which are more closely related to cows than true deer. Don't ask me why their common name includes the word deer. I don't know.
That seems very similar to, on the one side, deer or antelope.
I mean, yeah, they're ruminants.
A deer is an animal with antlers. Antlers are made not of bone, but of a material that's kind of similar to what fingernails are made of.
No.
That's not true. Antlers have a bone core and are not primarily composed of keratin, but rather other fibrous tissue, skin, and even blood vessels. Yeah, when a male deer grows antlers, they have a coat of skin that has a velvety covering of fur. Ever see a deer scraping it off? It's like a horror movie. I'm not even sure I can show it on YouTube because there's a lot of blood. By the way, this skin and fur is called antler velvet, just so you know.
And they lose their antlers. Their antlers fall off.
Hey, he actually said something true. Hooray!
In contrast, the antelope, which look very similar in body form.
Imagine two mid-sized ruminants that both live on open grasslands having a similar body shape. What are the odds? Well, I mean, pretty high, really.
Actually don't have antlers. They have bone horns.
Which are covered in keratin, like he said falsely about antlers. How can he get this so wrong? The man has a PhD in paleontology. This is honestly infuriating. It's hard for me to imagine he just doesn't know what antlers and horns are. But on the other hand, I can't see why he'd lie about it since he only needs them to be different at this point. And they are in fact different. I am at a loss on this one. Guys, gals, and others, if you think you have an explanation for why Kurt is so wrong, put it in the comments because I would love to have some ideas to help explain this insanity.
Horns that are made of bone and they don't fall off. And that makes us fairly easy to differentiate the deer from the antelope.
Yep, that's why deer are in cervidae, and the antelope are in bovidae, along with cows, buffalo, and bison.
There are scores of species of deer, scores of species of antelope. We're good to go, easy to tell the difference, until along comes the pronghorn. The pronghorn has a core in the middle of his antler that's actually made of bone and doesn't fall off.
Well, first, it's not an antler, it's an ossicone, and like both antlers and horns, has a bony core. Pointing out that it has a bone core means nothing. Like I said, earlier giraffoids and bovids and cervids are all in the clade Pecora, which literally means horn bearer. So yeah, all of those animals have similar head adornments with differences in the details of the anatomy.
And on the outside is an antler that is made of antler material and falls off. It's like, oh, great. So which is it?
No, unlike an antler, but like horn, it has a keratin sheath, and yes, it does shed. Because it's not a horn or an antler, it's an ossicone. Because this animal is a giraffoid, not a deer or a bovid. Giraffoidea doesn't cease to exist because Kurt Wise is confused about it, and spoiler alert, pronghorns fit well within the diversity of antilocaprids from the fossil record, which themselves fit in well with the wider giraffoid diversity, themselves a part of ruminant diversity. It's almost like nothing here actually violates our expectations from a nested hierarchy.
Is it an antelope because it's got a bone core?
Well, antelope horns, like all horns, have a bone core. This is for Dr. Armitage in the back. All horns have a bone core. But no, it's not an antelope, even though it is sometimes called one.
Or is it a deer because it's got an antler?
It doesn't have an antler. It has an ossicone that it sheds.
Again, biologists argue about which one it's in, and those that wimp out put him in his own category, his own family.
Noticing that a giraffeoid is a giraffeoid and not a member of either Cervidae or Bovidae isn't wimping out. It's doing the thing that Wise was okay with earlier, noticing which species group together. Is he now going to say that we should try to figure out if giraffes are antelope or deer? Because I'm pretty sure that he would say they are their own thing, but they also group with the pronghorn. So why is it wimpy to say that something closer to a giraffe than a deer or an antelope is in fact closer to the giraffe? This is like complaining that you're wimping out by saying that a wolf isn't a bear or a raccoon, and it's just its own thing. Yes, it is its own thing. And we know that from genetics, morphology, and the fossil record. The fact that this man doesn't know what an ossicone, a horn, or an antler is doesn't make scientists wimps, especially since the ones that specialize in ruminant systematics do actually know what those things are.
The lesser panda and the pronghorn aren't the only examples of organisms that don't seem to fit into categories.
Not only not the only two, they aren't even the first two. They do fit into categories quite well. Like, maybe these things were controversial in the 1970s and 80s, but we've come a long way in the half-century since.
They're one of a few dozen of these kinds of organisms around the world, and we might even throw in the platypus. Where did we put him? I mean, he's interesting.
He's a monotreme. That's where we put him. He's sort of mesothermic and egg-laying, which is kind of the default for mammaliformes, and it's only status quo bias that would make a paleontologist of all people think otherwise.
What is an animal that has webbed feet?
Given that webbed feet can arise de novo and that this has been observed thousands of times in human history, I'm going to say it's not a great way to classify animals. You see, every tetrapod that grows limbs to the point of getting digits has webbed digits. It takes programmed cell death to separate them into separate appendages. All that webbed feet means is that this didn't happen. That occurs in dogs where it has been bred into some hunting dogs, and it occurs in humans where it's usually seen as a birth defect and surgically corrected. But yeah, this is the kind of thing that can arise in a single generation, and since it happened in an aquatic animal, it was probably heavily selected for.
That has a bill, that lays an egg?
Well, it doesn't have a bill. Its mouth is soft and fleshy, whereas beaks and bills are made of keratin, not skin. This is like confusing rebar with a wooden stick because they both have about the same shape. As for laying eggs, I'd call it an amniote, since laying eggs with shells and an amniotic sac is the default reproductive strategy for all amniotes, which includes reptiles, birds, and mammals. And that's what the platypus does. And it's what nearly all mammal relatives did until basically after the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs. Again, this is just status quo bias. The fact that modern monotremes are now at an extremely low global diversity doesn't make them weird or a problem for evolution.
But a bird? A duck? No. In this particular case, he also has fur and produces milk.
Yeah, and doesn't have a duckbill or bird eggs. Remember, bird eggs are hard-shelled. Platypus eggs are soft-shelled.
So that seems to put him as a mammal. He's got some of the characteristics of a mammal, some of the characteristics of ducks.
Nope, not a single characteristic of a duck that isn't just shared across amniotes broadly. He's no more similar to a duck than he is to a tortoise. Also, I'm not sure why we're giving this entire group of animals a masculine gender, but whatever, Kurt started with it, and I don't really care enough to change it.
And perhaps some other characteristics of some other organisms.
Like what? Seriously, what non-platypus animals have bits of their anatomy stuck onto a platypus? Because I'd like to know. So far, Kurt hasn't given us a single example. In fact, here's Dapper from the past, sped up, giving this exact response in more detail to Ken Ham, making the same stupid claim.
Why would they call it bizarre?
Because it has no close relatives and has a highly restricted range, so most people will never encounter anything much like it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, it does have characteristics of a lot of different...
Nope, it has general mammal characteristics, monotreme characteristics, and platypus characteristics. It doesn't have characteristics from other animals.
Oh, let me show you what I put. This is a slide I use for my kids' program I do, called Dinosaurs and More with Buddy Davis.
So here, Ken is about to go through some alleged chimerical features of a platypus in rapid fire, but we're going to examine each claim in turn rather than letting Ham simply blow through them.
So a platypus has a bill like a duck.
In fact, no. The platypus bill is nothing like a duck's, except in overall shape. In a duck, the majority of the upper bill is a centered premaxilla, with the maxilla only starting towards the posterior end of the upper jaw. And of course, it still has the basic tetrapod lower jaw with a dentary, angular, syrangular, and articular bone on each side, and an articular quadrate joint. Also, the covering of the bill is keratin, not skin. In a platypus, the premaxilla and maxilla run almost the whole length of the upper jaw, and the premaxilla is not joined in the center, but splits to either side, forming a U shape that curls medially at the anterior end. The lower jaw consists only of the dentary, and only has a dentary squamosal jaw joint, like all other true mammals. It also has a bill composed of soft flesh rather than keratin. You see, if the bill of a platypus really were like the bill of a duck, that would actually be a problem for evolution, because we should never expect to see a bird skull on a mammal. That would basically violate the law of monophyly, and while we might not have to completely abandon everything about evolution, we certainly couldn't use much of it to explain the platypus. Unfortunately for Ham, the platypus bill is almost nothing like a duck's bill.
And a beaver-like tail.
It's not really that much like a beaver's tail, though. Both animals have dorsoventrally flattened tails that are fairly broad, but it's much more pronounced in the beaver, and in the beaver, but not the platypus, the tail is covered in scales rather than hair. Really though, neither tail is particularly unusual, and kind of flat and wide isn't exactly some amazing feature that anyone would suggest is a vital apomorphy that we can use to reliably trace biological lineages. Heck, even the North American and European beavers differ in this, with European beavers having less pronounced flattening and a more narrow tail. So even within what Ham would consider a kind, there can be variation in tail shape.
And hair like a bear.
Platypus fur is no more like a bear's hair than it is like a rat's, a tenrex, or a wombat's. So I'm not sure why Ham picked bear here. Basically, it's just dense fur with underfur and guard hair, like virtually all mammals have. But there is in fact one unusual aspect of platypus hair. It's biofluorescent. So if you shine a black light on a platypus, it'll glow like it's at a rave. Bears don't really do that. So even in the most basic trait, that yeah, the platypus have mammal fuzz, Ham isn't quite right.
Wet feet like an otter.
Well, first, most webbing on all animals' feet comes about basically the same way. You see, all tetrapods have this webbing as embryos, but to separate the digits, the cells between them are usually programmed to die. All that has to happen for webbing is for that signal for the cells to undergo apoptosis, which is a technical term for programmed cell death, to simply be turned off. So ducks, frogs, Labrador retrievers, otters, etc. all have basically the same webbing for the same reason, because it's a simple mutation. Even some humans have webbing to various extents for this reason. However, you'll notice that in fact, no, the platypus does not have webbing like an otter. You see, like virtually all animals with webbed feet, the webbing of an otter does not extend past the unguals, that is the last bone on the fingers over which the claws grow. But in the platypus, the webbing extends past the claws by growing beyond and under them. That is unique in all animals. Once again, we have Ken Ham looking at only the most superficial aspects of the platypus. All it takes is just a few moments of thought to realize that his comparisons are nonsense.
Claws like a reptile. And
Claws like a reptile? Like how? They're just standard amnio claws. The claws of reptiles and mammals are pretty much the same thing. They're both keratin sheaths grown over the bone core of the distalmost phalange, called the ungule. You could just say it has claws and leave it at that.
it has hair like a bear.
I already covered the hair. I think Ken may be getting a bit forgetful in his old age.
And feeds its young on milk.
Yeah, it feeds its young on milk, because it's a mammal, which we already confirmed while checking whether the bill was like that of a duck. Also confirming it to be a mammal is the division of the vertebrae in the torso into thoracic and lumbar, which doesn't happen in other tetrapods than mammals.
And spurs like a rooster.
In fact, this might be the only fair comparison. The spurs of a platypus and a rooster are surprisingly similar. They are both keratin-covered bones that emerge near the walking part of the foot. But there are differences even here that are important. The bone spur of a rooster emerges from the fused metatarsal bones that are a characteristic of birds. On the other hand, for the platypus, the spur emerges from the tarsal bones proximal to the metatarsals. Also, for reasons we're about to get into, it is hollow, unlike a rooster's. So again, while this might be the most fair comparison so far, there are still significant differences that make these superficially similar structures quite different under the hood, so to speak.
And venom like a snake.
You see, once again we get to some oddities. While the action of platypus and snake venom are actually quite similar, the proteins that make them up are about as different as they could possibly be, and the platypus venom lacks the necrotizing effects of snake venom. So here we have two different kinds of venom that are doing mostly the same thing, but the proteins making them up are almost completely different. If a common designer uses common design for the same purpose, why don't platypuses just have snake venom? Perhaps minus the proteins that cause tissue necrosis. Why did the designer make it look exactly like you'd expect if snakes and platypuses both evolve their venom separately?
We have these occasional organisms that don't seem to fit into our nested hierarchy that most organisms can fit into.
Would have been nice if we were given some examples.
And then we have these homoplasies all over the place in the system. What's going on here?
Except that a homoplasie can be resolved in most cases by just using more specific character sets. So sure, you get a homoplasie in ruminants if you say, has a pokey outy head decoration is one of your character states. But if you include velvet, shedding, keratin sheath, extent of bone core, etc., suddenly that homoplasie goes away and you recover the shape of ruminants with perfectly nested hierarchy. Similarly, if rather than just big wrist bone, you include things like the angle of the wrist bone and the way it opposes the digits, etc., it's actually possible to disambiguate the homoplasie between the red and giant pandas, even if it is admittedly harder than with pronghorns and other ruminants.
I would suggest that what God is showing by the nested hierarchy is a simple hierarchy of form. But alas, these homoplasies suggest a unity across the entire spectrum, as if there's a single God that made all of them.
Great, that's a suggestion. But the existence of convergent evolution, which is all that's happening here, isn't really a point against evolution. Organisms evolve superficially similar traits to deal with common problems, and then you look under the hood and, oh no, the underlying biology is quite different, exactly like if they weren't designed, but evolved.
And these organisms that don't fit into the taxonomy,
no examples of which have been provided, so I'm still holding down that X button to doubt.
Also suggest a unity across the diagram.
I don't even know what that means.
So we have both a hierarchy that is nested and unity. I call this a netted hierarchy.
He can call it whatever he wants, but homoplasies aren't violations of nested hierarchies. They are areas where you have to dig deeper to resolve the confusion.
It is not just nested, it's nested plus unity to give us netted hierarchy. I believe a netted hierarchy is a physical illustration of the unified hierarchy of the Godhead.
Cool story.
So where does this hierarchy come from?
The real one from Evolution and Common Ancestry. The fake one from Kurt Wise's imagination.
One of the issues that we can talk about is the controversy on bacteria.
Oh, is there a well-known controversy on bacteria? I didn't know.
I have not used the word prokaryote to describe bacteria, even though that is the common word that is used to describe bacteria.
And archaea, but yeah.
Why do I not use it? Because prokaryote means pro means pre, karyon, which means body. And the idea of calling a bacterium a prokaryote is that, according to evolution, it has not yet evolved its organelles.
I mean, okay, so it has an etymology he doesn't like. I wonder if he knows that Procyonidae, the family of raccoons, a word he also used, has the same root for pro. It means before dogs. Maybe Y should get some consistent standards for which words are naughty words.
As if it lived a little bit longer or whatever, if evolution was kinder to it, it would have evolved organelles.
First, it's not organelles broadly, it's the nucleus. That's the defining difference here. And it's not like bacteria have been hard done by. They're the most numerous organisms we know of, and they aren't going extinct anytime soon. They are fantastically successful. The fact that they don't have things that humans tend to value, like large size, physical strength, or intelligence, matters not a whit to evolution or the bacteria themselves. They're not waiting to evolve a nucleus. If they don't have one, and they don't need one, they're going about their business with their loopy genomes and operons.
But that's not why, I would suggest that's not why prokaryotes have organelles, or have no organelles.
Is he going to say it's because they don't need them?
Bacteria do not have organelles because they don't need them.
Oh hey, I was right. So, how is this an argument?
Bacteria are tiny little cells that don't need the additional surface area that is provided by organelles. They can get all of their metabolism done using the surface area of their exterior membrane.
Okay.
Bacteria are not examples of things that have not yet evolved. They are actually examples of things that are extremely well designed.
And procyonids aren't animals that are just waiting to become dogs, even though that's what the name means. No one has, to my knowledge, ever said that bacteria are unevolved. They are highly evolved, probably more so than any animal given their amazingly short generation times. They are different from eukaryotes, not worse or better, not more or less evolved. They evolved in a different direction because that's what evolution is. After a lineage goes its own way, it diverges both genotypically and phenotypically. Pointing out that bacteria are quite different from the very, very distantly related eukaryotes isn't exactly an argument against evolution. These are groups that split off like 4 billion years ago. They should be extremely different.
Also, when we turn our attention to cells, we find that cells themselves are extremely tight or complicated systems. Remember our discussion of biological systems.
I don't remember that because I'm not a religious watcher of Kurt Wise, but I feel like thing X is neat, therefore God did it argument is coming up.
Cells are made of many components. You saw a bunch of those components by looking at organelles. They're very tightly heavily interwoven parts, extremely complex. Cells are many, many times more complex than anything we've ever seen generated spontaneously under natural circumstances.
Yeah, modern cellular life doesn't just pop out of nowhere de novo, but that's not what anyone is arguing happens. He then just goes on again to say cells are complex. We've already covered it. We know.
I've sometimes, when I teach about cells, I show the analogy between a cell and an orbiting city.
I'd have picked a thing that, exists. But anyway, yeah, cells are complex. I'm not going to make you guys sit here and listen to him drone on about that fact. It's not in dispute. The horse is very dead and does not need to be kicked.
The bacteria are just the right size to exist, to do all their metabolism using the outside membrane.
Is the argument that well-adapted organisms exist, therefore evolution can't happen? Because evolution is the thing that helps organisms adapt, even in most creationist models.
It is as if these cells have been specially designed, which I believe they have been. It's the only way to explain their awesomeness.
But there hasn't been an attempt to make that argument. He literally went from, gee, cells are neat, to therefore they were specially designed. That's not an argument. It's barely even a claim. It's just wishful thinking.
Then you turn to the organizational hierarchy of life.
Which, that whole cellular anatomy is already part of, so it's part of the same thing.
The number of hierarchical levels that we find in biology is exactly the number of levels that ought to be given the number of cells that are found in a given organism.
I have no idea what that means. What's the number of hierarchical ranks that exist in an organism, and how does it relate to the gross number of cells in said organism? What is even happening right now? Honestly, if you know what the heck he's talking about, then let me know in the comments. Also, like the video and subscribe to the channel.
If you got just one cell and you're a bacterium, you have those 5 levels. If you're one cell but you're a eukaryotic cell, you've got 6 levels. And if you got 1 million cells, there's a certain number of levels of hierarchy that are just right. I mean, people have done research on this. If you've got a company, a manufacturing company with so many workers, you're going to need a certain number of hierarchical levels to run it most efficiently.
Maybe this is a thing, but I'm not aware of it. I don't know how it was decided that bacteria have 5 levels of hierarchy and single-celled eukaryotes have 6. I really want to see a citation for that stuff, because that sounds super arbitrary.
If you have too many levels, it's not run efficiently. You put too much money into the chiefs and not enough money into the Indians.
Yeah, we're going to cut off Dr. Wise after he just dropped some casual racism against Native Americans. Okay, well that whole thing was not only wrong and stupid, it was self-contradictory. But what else can I expect at this rate? I don't know why I'm still surprised by just how wrong a creationist can be. Anyway, thanks for watching, and please do remember to hit like on this video and subscribe. It really helps the channel. If you are subscribed, check the bell icon to make sure you're getting all notifications so you can always know when there's more content from me. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur. I just want to take a minute to thank my channel members and patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Bob Knob, Bent Hovend, Denny5252, Ian Chen, John Ackerman, Chris Love, Landon Noel, Lingwei, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Veed, and Patrick Dennis. The people whose names you see on screen right now are a big part of keeping the lights on here at Casa Dino, and without them, this channel really wouldn't exist in the form that it does now. If you'd like to join this awesome team, there are links down in the description to join the channel or to join my Patreon. It starts at only $1 on Patreon or $1.99 here on YouTube. There's also a convenient join button right below this video if you want to join as a member on YouTube. Joining lets you see most of my videos early, in some cases more than a month early. Also, you can join an exclusive member and patron-only Discord server, which has a pretty direct line to me. And as you go up in tier, you get more and more benefits, including getting your name on this list. If a monthly subscription isn't really for you, but you still like to help out the channel, there's a merch store linked in the description. It has t-shirts, it has baby onesies, it has mugs, it has blankets, anything you want, Dapper Dino branded. And if none of that seems right for you, please just like and share my videos and subscribe to the channel. That helps immensely. Thank you very much.